What's the story, everyone? Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. How are we all getting on? How is the form? So, in this video, we're going to be discussing the Dublin footballers because it has been announced, it is official. Brian Fenton has officially retired as a Dublin senior footballer. At the age of 31, Brian Fenton has officially retired. It was announced this morning. You'll see the tweet on screen from Dublin GA who have officially announced it. So by the time you're watching this, it would have been announced yesterday, I suppose. But yeah, wow, like what a massive surprise, what a massive shock. Definitely did not see this coming, in all honesty. There were plenty of rumours about maybe going on a break or taking a year out and going travelling and everything else, and I think a lot of us could understand that, to be fair, given the fact that Brian Fenton has given so much to Dublin down the years, like in the last 10 years or so. And like the mad thing is as well, is that Fenton, like he's never really had any major injury problems. He's always been there, like even throughout the league, you know, over the last couple of years when Dublin have been rotating and trying out different players. Brian Fenton's always been like the one constant that's always just been there. Do you know what I mean? Like he hasn't had a huge amount of injury problems. He's always consistently been there, and I think his availability, in my opinion, has been one of his biggest assets, as well as obviously everything else that he does on the pitch that is very well spoke of. But I think his availability is maybe something that often goes under the radar. But yeah, very, very surprising, to be honest with you. Definitely did not see this coming. I think as a Dublin fan, knew after that defeat to Galway, there was going to be retirements, there was going to be change within Dublin. And we obviously saw a little bit of that. James McCarthy is obviously retired. We still don't really know about Cluxton and Fitzsimons. I mean, Cluxton's one of them that we probably won't know until the league at some stage, or probably like the day before the first game of the Leinster Championship or something of that nature. To be fair, like Cluxton isn't going to play in the league, and we probably won't see him until the Leinster semi-finals or something of that nature. But he did play in the new rules games. But then again, James McCarthy was involved there as well. So it's a little bit unusual with Cluxton. You never really quite know what he's going to do. Fitzsimons, a lot of people expecting him maybe to retire as well. That hasn't been announced yet. But he is still playing with the Coola footballers at the moment. And they are obviously have progressed quite well this year. Won the Dublin Championship. You know, probably going to go far in Leinster. Possibly even a stab at an All-Ireland there as well. So I think there is a consensus there that maybe he might call it a day if Coola go quite far in the club championship. Con won't be available for large parts of the league as well if Coola do go far as well. So there is that kind of a concern. But Brian Fenton retired is definitely one that I did not see coming, to be honest with you. Like at the age of 31, as I said previously, he's been playing consistently. He's never looked burnt out. His form and his standards have always been at their absolute best. Even last season, when Dublin, obviously got beat in the quarterfinals, he was still one of Dublin's best players, and his performance levels at times were still absolutely brilliant. Absolutely outstanding in more ways than one. And then you think back to 2023 when he, arguably probably should have won Footballer of the Year that season. So a little bit surprising in more ways than one that he has decided to retire. When you think about it, like most players will retire probably around 34, 35. But Fenton at 31, when he still looks at his absolute best, like with James McCarthy, for example, McCarthy's been in and out of the side over the last couple of years. He's probably been held back for like the big championship games. And he's definitely had his injury problems, there's no doubt about that. Whereas with Fenton, there's been none of that. There's been absolutely none of that. So it definitely has come as a massive shock. I think another thing as well, with James McCarthy retiring, I was fully sure Brian Fenton was nailed on to be the next captain of Dublin. Brian Fenton, after what he's given to Dublin over the last 10 years or so, more than deserves to be the captain with McCarthy going. And I know some people will say, well, Cluxton will probably be the captain now. But to be honest with you, I don't know who's going to be the captain. I don't think you give it back to Cluxton, to be honest with you, because he's probably only got another year. Maybe you look at someone like a Brian Howard or a Kieran Kilkenny. I'm not entirely sure now. But yeah, very, very surprising in fairness. Look at what Brian Fenton's achieved. I mean, 7 All-Irelands, 10 Leinster Championships, 2-time Footballer of the Year in both 2018 and 2020 as well. And yeah, one of the best midfielders of all time, if not the greatest midfielder of all time, in my opinion. Incredibly enough as well, he only lost 3 championship games throughout his entire years as well, which is absolutely mental, isn't it? Just 3 championship defeats. You're obviously looking at the 21 defeat to Mayo, the 22 defeat to Kerry, and then obviously last year's defeat to Galway as well. So 3 championship games he's lost. Like, that's absolutely mad in more ways than one. And I mean, it will be interesting to hear, like, if he does come out and do an interview at some stage and speak about why he's retiring. Is there an injury issue there that maybe we don't know about? Maybe does he feel like he's achieved all there is to achieve and there's nothing more left to do? I mean, he is only 2 All-Irelands away from catching the likes of James McCarthy, Cluxton and Fitzsimons for those 9 All-Irelands, and dare to dream, maybe he could hit the 10 potentially. But obviously Dublin winning 3 All-Irelands in the next 5-6 years, probably very, very unlikely, in fairness. But yeah, maybe Fenton looked at it as well and thought there's a lot of players retiring here. It's the last year of Dessie Farrell's tenure in terms of his term. His term does expire at the end of 2025. So maybe he was looking at it and thinking, Dublin maybe don't have a lot coming through at the moment. You're looking at some of the younger players that are coming through. There doesn't appear to be a huge amount of players making the step up. And we've obviously seen Dublin look very, very vulnerable as well over the last couple of seasons. I mean, yes, they did win the All-Ireland in 2023, and that was absolutely incredible. But I do think people forget, for the majority of that year, Dublin were very, very poor. I mean, they just about got promoted, limped over the line in more ways than one in Division 2. They nearly got beat by Kildare in the Leinster Championship. And yes, they turned it on hugely against the likes of Mayo in the quarterfinals, beat Monaghan, and then obviously did enough to beat Kerry in the final. Last year, for large parts, Dublin actually looked even better than they had in 2023. But then, obviously, again, on more than one occasion, there was just a few underwhelming performances against Louth in the Leinster final. Mayo, albeit I think Mayo played very well that day, in fairness, in the in the group stages, and then obviously that defeat to Galway as well. So we are seeing Dublin looking more and more vulnerable, more and more beatable. And I just wonder if that maybe had a bit of a part to play. Maybe is he looking at it and thinking that maybe he doesn't see Dublin going in the right direction. It's kind of hard to know, and obviously only he can answer that. But in fairness, like, speaking of Dublin in general, I think this is like a huge, because whatever about Fenton being there himself and maybe having doubts about players coming through and everything else, to not have Fenton there now for Dublin next season is a huge, huge blow. Like, not having McCarthy there, you could kind of understand, in fairness. And to be fair, like, I think Dublin have probably planned for that. McCarthy hasn't always been involved like last year. So I think, to be fair, you've kind of seen that one coming, so you could plan for it. Same goes with Cluxton and Fitzsimons. But to lose Fenton, like, there's going to be a massive sort of hole to fill in that midfield, in my opinion. And like, looking at Dublin's midfield pairing, like, when Championship comes around, is going to be very, very interesting to see who would play in there. Because let's not forget, like, McCarthy would often play in midfield as well. So you're nearly looking at a midfield pairing of McCarthy and Fenton not there, which is a little bit bizarre. And maybe you're looking at a player like Padraig Huffick-Byrne maybe to come in. Killian McGuinness has looked very good over the last couple of years as well. Adam Waddick is a player I've been singing the praises for the last couple of seasons as well, and I'd definitely like to see him get an opportunity for Dublin, and maybe he could be an option in around midfield. You do still have Brian Howard there, in fairness, and you can obviously put Tom Lahiff in there as well. So, but at the same time, it's just not Brian Fenton, is it? Like, what he gives you in attack, defence, fielding of the ball, and just the calmness he brings to that Dublin team, I think is going to be hugely, hugely missed. And look, I think it goes without saying, I think there are vulnerabilities in this Dublin team going into next year. I think the golden era that was there in terms of the 6 in a row, I think is becoming more and more evident now that team is very much sort of a distant past. Yes, they won an All-Ireland last year in 2023, and I still expect Dublin to be in and amongst it next year, but I do think there could be a drop-off, and I think the more and more you look at it, you look at under-20s, you look at minors, there doesn't appear to be a huge amount coming through, in all honesty. And there is that worry that maybe not next year, but the year after, I genuinely do think there could be a massive drop in this Dublin team that could genuinely shock people, in terms of, you look at Kildare and the young players they're bringing through. I think Meath are even bringing through good young players at the moment. Louth have had a huge amount of development. I genuinely do think that Dublin's grip on the Leinster Championship could possibly come to an end. Maybe not next year, but maybe the year after. I definitely think it's possible, and I never thought I would have been saying that, a year ago or whatever. And there are uncertainties around a lot of the future of Dublin players. I mean, Paul Mannion and Jack McCaffrey have obviously been in now over the last couple of seasons. Are they going to commit, and are they going to be available for next year? We don't quite know. Rumours about some other Dublin players maybe potentially going travelling as well that we'll obviously have to wait and hear about. Dessie Farrell, as I said before, this is his last year, so especially when it's a manager's last year as well, like I don't think he's going to extend after this year personally, no matter what happens. So there is that uncertainty around Dublin. And as he said before, like you're hanging on to some of these older players like Cluxton, like Fitzsimons, and whilst they're absolute greats, absolute legends, there is the argument that it's stunting other players who could potentially be coming through, the likes of a Theo Clancy who could play in Fitzsimon's position, or maybe even a David O'Hanlon who's looked very good in goal for Dublin in the last couple of years. Overall, there are vulnerabilities about this Dublin side, and I do think Brian Fenton's retirement, in my opinion, definitely highlights that. I think in previous years gone by, you could make a lot of cases for Dublin to be the favourites going into any year, you know, in the last 10 years in terms of being favourites for the All-Ireland. But next year, to be honest with you, genuinely do think there's probably 3-4 teams I would think of, in my opinion, that are going into next year in a much better place than Dublin. I think Galway are, I think Armagh are, in my opinion. Donegal are looking very strong. Kerry are still going to be thereabouts as they have been in the last couple of years. And then even some of the other teams that are probably in around Dublin's level, like Derry could definitely make a step up. Tyrone could definitely do it as well. So there's a lot of worries from a Dublin perspective going into next year. Now, to be fair, I remember having a lot of worries in 2023, and then Dublin went on to win the All-Ireland, and we definitely didn't see that coming. But going into this year, especially with the retirements and some of the uncertainties around some Dublin players, there definitely are some massive, massive question marks there. And look, the thing is, Brian Fenton wasn't an underage superstar, so maybe there are other players, and like club championships, like the standard of players in club championships is always at a very, very high level. So I do expect there will be players to come into this Dublin team that we probably haven't even heard of, in all honesty, because that's what Dublin have done such a great job of in the last couple of years, or last 10 years or so, whether it be a Dessie Farrell or whether it be a Jim Gavin. But yeah, absolutely massive, massive news with Brian Fenton retiring. What could it mean for Dublin next season? Do let me know in the comments down below. For myself, I definitely think there is a lot of vulnerabilities now with this Dublin side going into next year. Some of the players that are staying on are going to be, a year older. There's question marks over some key players as well, and McCaffrey, Mannion, Costello, Kilkenny, these lads, are they all going to stick about? Con O'Callaghan as well. So massive question marks over this Dublin side going into next year. What kind of an effect could it have on Dublin football going into next season? It's going to be very, very interesting to see. But do let me know your thoughts, your opinions on the video in the comments down below. And yeah, like one last thing on Brian Fenton, one of the best Dublin players of all time, without question. And I'm not going to lie, I'm absolutely gutted about his retirement.